We are on.
All right, so I can also see we are live on YouTube. Amazing. Welcome everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining. I welcome you all on behalf of Samvad Germany, and it's my pleasure to welcome our honorable guest, Mr. Micheal Steiner, and also to all participants and various organization representatives. Um, Thank you so much for joining. And so the schedule I will discuss with you, which will be like starting from our introduction, and then we'll probably go with our small somewhat session, which we are all interested about. And interestingly, we are also celebrating 70 years of India and German relationship. And I'm sure this will be an amazing session today. Then we'll probably go into small Q&A section. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat box. We have a dedicated timing where Mr. Steiner would answer your questions. And then finally, vote of thanks, and we'll end Samvad. So like I said, introduction to Samvad. So what is Samvad? So we are a team of intellectual and cultural readers interested to engage in an authentic and open dialogue with German and Indian community to understand the local challenges with an integrated solution approach. How do we do it? Like our methodology. We actively engage with the society and inviting experts, intellectuals, and cultural leaders from German and Indian community for an open dialogue and discussion on various topics relevant in Germany. And our Samvad frequency is monthly. So we have Samvad every month. Going forward, like previous sessions who have not attended, please search on YouTube Samvad Germany, and you will probably find the previous session, which was Indians in Germany and their social networks by Dr. Carsten Bruch, and German schooling, which got tremendous response, which you can also look it up on YouTube by Ms. Susanna Such. And finally, like what inspired us to do this, right? So there is a very inspirational quote from Rigveda, which is Ano Bhadra Kratavo Yantu Vishwata, means let noble thoughts comes to us from all direction, and that have inspired us so much to start Samvad Germany. And we always try our best to bring some informative and intellectual talks for you guys. And with that, I will go into guest introduction. Over to you, Guru Raj.
Thank you, Preethamji. Hello, everyone. My name is my name is Guru Raj, and I'm joining Samvad from Erlangen. Our guest today is a special dignitary from Bavaria. He completed his law studies in Munich and Paris, and later embarked his career in foreign services. In his illustrious career, he held several key positions and served in the different geographical locations, including United States of America, Czech Republic, Croatia, Congo, and so on. He was also the head of UN Mission Kosovo, and later represented Germany in United Nations in Geneva. So he was also a German ambassador to Italy and San Marino. Later, he was handpicked from the German government for his assignment in Pakistan and Afghanistan. Last but not the least, from 2012 to 2015, he was German ambassador to India. Now, during his tenure in India, he not only strived for improving government-to-government relations, which typically I think all the diplomats are expected to do, but what makes him stand apart is he tried to connect with the local people and culture. He organized concert in Kashmir. He hosted satsangs led by Mr. Sri Ravi Shankar on his birthday, to just name a few. Yes, you guessed. Our guest is an unconventional diplomat. He surprised many when he seamlessly featured as Shah Rukh Khan in a song from Kal Ho Na Ho, where he played as a lead role as Shah Rukh Khan. I'm sure most of us would have watched it and really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it, and hats off to you, sir. Uh, the one of the most the quest of perfectionism could be easily seen as a typical German. Germans are known for perfectionism, and that was easily reflected as he flawlessly tried to lip sync the Hindi lyrics, even though Hindi is a foreign language to him. Finally, he ended his diplomatic career on this high note, and by paying tribute to Bollywood, no doubt with his gesture, he won many hearts. So from Lebe Yets to going live Yets, for that, ladies and gentlemen, I would now request you to please welcome Mr. Micheal Steiner.
Thank you very much, Guru Rajji. Namaste, guten Abend, good evening. I'm Girish Ravandur, and on behalf of Samvad Germany, I welcome you all for this wonderful evening of Samvad, of conversations. As India and Germany observe 70 years of diplomatic relationships, united by the vibrant democracies, the trade histories dating as long as 500 years, the cooperations extending in the areas of education, technology, science, economy, and trade, it is worthwhile for all of us to take a pause, to celebrate, and to cherish this wonderful occasion and this relationships the two countries have. And it is also important to understand and to highlight the role of us, all of us as Indian diaspora, the Indian community as part of this important relationships. And I'm very honored, extremely privileged to be striking this conversation with our esteemed guest, Mr. Micheal Steiner, former German ambassador to India. Welcome, Ms. Micheal Steiner. And thank you very much, first of all, for your time this evening with all of us.
Thank you very much for this invitation. I'm really honored to be with you, and I'm very much looking forward. I don't know what exactly will happen, but of course, it's a great experience. I don't know how many people are out there, but it's good to have this form of conversation.
Yes. Thanks definitely to pandemic. I think we have people not just from Bavaria, also as you see from other states of Germany as well. So as we start this wonderful samvad and conversation, I also request all of the audience to listen in, to enjoy this conversation as we talk about the relationships, talk about the history, and also talk about how the future of this relationship is going ahead from the eyes and from the views of Mr. Steiner, and to also understand the roles that we could play as part of this important relationship. Please feel free to also pose your questions as we take along this samvad, these conversations into the Zoom chat, which we will be picking up during the end of this conversation in the Q&A. So let's start our samvad, our conversation, Mr. Steiner. Are you all set?
I'm perfectly fine.
Perfect, great. So you grew up in Germany, you completed your studies, not just, you did your studies in Germany and also in Paris, in France. You held so many different offices across different geographies in the world. What is that one personal high point that has stayed with you as a person due to your stint in India, Mr. Steiner?
No, I was very lucky in my career because I had 15 very different posts. And I come to India because somehow India was at the peak. But I must tell you, I'm a German. And for us Germans, in my lifespan, of course, the reunification was the reunification of East Germany and West Germany was the most striking event. And I'm sure Indians can feel for this perfectly well. And therefore, I was posted twice in Prague. And Prague, neighboring country, Czechoslovakia to Germany, the wall did not fall in Berlin. The wall did fall in Prague, in the German embassy, where later on I became ambassador. But at that time, I was just member of this embassy, and I was standing on a famous, in Germany, very famous balcony. And that was the balcony from which the then foreign minister told to 8,000 refugees we had at the embassy. 8,000, you know, in a huge, but not as huge embassy as you can imagine. This was an embassy where already Beethoven directed an orchestra, so a very nice little place in a park, overflooded with 8,000 refugees from East Germany who wanted to go to the West. And that night, when Hans-Dietrich Genscher, from this balcony, said to these people in tents, 8,000 people we had to manage there at the embassy, that they can cross the border to the West. And when I saw the reaction and felt the shiver over my back, I knew East Germany is finished. The GDR is finished, and I knew we will reunite again. And that, of course, was for me as a German the most important moment in my life. But surely we come to India, which for me was a change in that Eurocentric perspective so many Europeans had. And therefore, this was the second most important post in my life.
Wonderful. So that's very great to know that the stint of India has remained one of the most significant part of your life as well. So that's really good to know. And thanks also for recollecting the historical moment during your stint in Prague. As you said, being a German, yeah, and the land which is known for its Oktoberfest, and people flaunt Germany all over the world for its Oktoberfest. A little known interesting fact about you as a person is that you are a teetotaler, and India being the topmost country in the world, which produces the largest number of vegetarians, you are also a vegetarian. Can you please tell us about you being a teetotaler and vegetarian?
Yeah, it's a kind of biographical absurdity, I must tell you. The fact is, I grew up in Munich, and of course we went to the Oktoberfest, and the Oktoberfest is surely about food, but mainly about beer. And of course I was part in that, and every autumn I was at the Oktoberfest and didn't limit myself to just 1 or 2 beers. These were many beers when we were students. But in my career, I was posted also to Geneva. And Geneva is a small little place, and this brings me to an answer to your question, where you don't meet so many people except diplomats. Mm-hmm. So every evening there was a reception somewhere, you know, in the context of the United Nations, and you always saw the same people. And diplomats, there are some which are funny, there are some which are very interesting, but there are also others. And if you meet them constantly, you know, you have a tendency to drink a glass of wine, and maybe 2 even, just to bear that situation. So when I got used to this habit every evening, I wanted to find out, am I in any way dependent of alcohol? So I decided to make a pause for 1 month and to see whether I can live without. And you know what happened? I said, so why don't do the same thing with meat? And try to live for 1 month without alcohol and without meat. So I did that, and it worked. I was not dependent. It was a bit strange in the community. It was also strange when I was later in Rome, in Italy, ambassador. People thought a guy who doesn't drink our fantastic wine, a guy who doesn't eat meat and doesn't eat fish, a bit strange, but it works. And you know, the point was, in Geneva, after this 1 month, I thought, I feel so well. You know, I can sleep well and everything is fine and my values, blood values, very good. So I did a 2nd month. And then I met a doctor in Geneva, a Swiss doctor, and he said, your health is fantastic. What did you do? And I thought, and that's because of not drinking alcohol and being a vegetarian. So I did it 6 months. And then after these 6 months, I thought it would be a pity to go back to the old habits, and I stayed with it. So it came about quite natural because Geneva was a bit boring. And in order to overcome that, I maybe drank too many glasses regularly each evening, and this is how it came about. And I stayed with it, and I feel perfectly fine. Meanwhile, and of course, it helped me a lot in India, where it is really for a vegetarian, it's the paradise, of course.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's wonderful to learn about your personal journey on becoming this vegetarian, and also the positive benefits that you have had. So looks like that has been a feedback personally into you, your health indicators, which has made you remain one.
There is one problem. When I came back to Munich, Elisa, my wife, and myself, we were at the Oktoberfest. Now, that is a stress test. To go to the Oktoberfest, to be a teetotaler, and not to eat a Händel or something, it's quite a test, because those people are in a different world, to be careful in pronouncing it. So there I saw that sometimes it's difficult, but you know, the next day I'm of course in a better position than all these guys who go to the Oktoberfest, including the Indians.
Absolutely. As you also said, Steiner, I mean, you highlighted you being a diplomat, yeah? A German diplomat. But what we have seen during your stint, also from the introduction, that you have not remained a conventional diplomat. You have taken certain risks. You have probably pushed the envelope a little bit. And one of the superstars of the country, which also binds the hearts of Germany, Mr. Shah Rukh Khan, who is definitely compared to the likes of Brad Pitt and several other superstars. And we see that you actually took on a role to recreate the magic of Kal Ho Na Ho. If not many of the audience today know, from the statistics I saw, there are more than 200,000 views of this wonderful song that you have recreated together with your wife. Please walk us through the journey and what was the agenda behind this, you being a diplomat, and how did this help you to connect also to the people?
Yes. The first point is the idea of a diplomat, which you might have in your mind, that these guys go to cocktails, go to the government, to the foreign ministry in the host country. that is only a small part of the reality. Today, it's not that you are the envoy, of the king towards another king, and you tell about the interest of your king, and you trick the other guy in contracts. No. Mm-hmm. Today, the by far largest part for diplomat is people-to-people contacts, foster people-to-people contacts. And of course, an important part of that is culture. And in India, Bollywood is a core element, even of Indian nationality, because it holds the country, as you know, together. And seeing that there is a colonial past, not so much of Germany, but as you know, of others, which is linked to a certain disrespect also to other cultures, I thought it is a good sign of respect for the culture of India to try to, of course, not taking myself too seriously, and Salman Khurshid, who was the other guy, and my wife, who was the lady we were competing for, we didn't take ourselves too seriously, but the idea was to show our respect for the Indian culture. And I must tell you, the most difficult thing here was the lip synchronization, because I don't speak Hindi. My wife speaks Hindi a little bit, but I don't speak it. That is very difficult to do lip synchronization in a different language, or to do these gestures, I mean, you are talking about a very professional actor who knows exactly what to do in a moment, but I'm a clumsy diplomat who cannot dance, nothing. So it was a kind of, homage, paying respect to the Indian culture, and the Indians understood that. And we had, in fact, more than 1 million clicks on YouTube for this little film, but it was a hell of a work. These little stints maybe took 1 second or 2 seconds, and we had to repeat it 50 times, 60 times in the night on the roof of the embassy, because we played that in the embassy. It was cold, and each time I didn't get the gestures. It was very difficult, but I learned also a lot. And I must say, I have a lot of respect also for these actors and for the culture. And by the way, the song, which we did there, is Kalhona Ho, is a very good song. It's not just, music, but it's a song with a meaning. And this idea of, to live now, to not to dream somewhere in the future, but to do things now is a very good theme, and a very good and nice song. I loved it.
Fantastic. So may I ask, how many Bollywood friends did you make after this?
I met a number of people, and the point was that there are many TV stations in India, much more than, of course, than in Germany. But the TV stations had to show this film because the audience asked for it. And sometimes, and over the TV stations, we got, of course, also in contact with many Indians who didn't live in Delhi, but in all places of the country. Okay. And that was a great experience.
I personally thoroughly enjoyed, and it's also difficult to make very too much of differences between the original and what you have created.
Please.
And also for all of them who have not witnessed, maybe we will also provide that YouTube handle for them to see this and enjoy. Yeah. Okay. You definitely, as part of this encounters and the stints, it has definitely made you travel the subcontinent, yes, as we all would love to call the country of India as, into the northern and into the southern parts of the country. Yeah. what was that which has impressed you the most about India as a nation, Mr. Steiner?
I mean, it is, of course, striking how diverse the country is. If you think about Kashmir, where we did this concert till the south, I've visited many schools, and because at that time there was a program of German language in schools, and therefore I visited many schools all over the country. As a German ambassador in India, you mainly live in airplanes de facto, because you constantly have to travel. There are two things really which struck me, and which somehow I encountered in the whole country, wherever it was, in UP, in the south, wherever. And one thing was this hunger I saw in so many young people to invest in education, in learning something, in order to achieve a better place in their life. An incredible hunger is out there, and an eagerness to learn, incredible. And this I really encountered everywhere in India. People are different, talk different languages, have different religions, but this hunger under the young people is there. And the second thing is, I mean, we always say India is the largest democracy in the world, which is of course true. But what I have experienced in many elections is that this is not just a theoretical thing. Of course, there are many irregularities in elections. We all know that. And that is, you have this everywhere in the world. And you have it, of course, in India, and you have bad people, of course, which utilize political power. But what you have very genuinely, and that is a speciality of India, that democracy is rooted in the people. People love it. I mean, an election in India, national election, or in a regional election, is something which is where people are so involved and so engaged and have so accepted the idea of a democratic choice that I think many Western countries could take that as an example. So democracy is not just, it's a democracy, China is surely not a democracy like India is. We all know that, but it's deeply rooted in the people. And that is the striking thing. So these two things come to my mind: the hunger to learn, the hunger for education, and this deep-rooted sense of democracy wherever, in cities, in the jungle, everywhere you can encounter that.
Certainly. I mean, I personally, and also many of us who have dialed in today, the audience, the viewers who are going to be watching this, can definitely identify to that hunger, which has actually brought most of us into the current position that we are in. And also the democracy, which has always given us the freedom, the voice to play ourselves into the different roles and into different spheres of the country. So it also reflects from your words, which is also excellent. Now, as we speak about the subcontinent and also your own stint, and today as we are celebrating the 70 years of diplomatic ties, and as I also mentioned, the trade ties go beyond this and almost about 500 years. How do you personally see this historical connections evolving over time into the different fields, of education, of the economy of trade. I mean, we know that we have certain sister model concept between Germany and India. We have had several exchange programs in education specifically. So how do you personally see that this has evolved, for us to also take pride of this wonderful collaboration we have between the two countries?
Now, seen from a German perspective, India was, so to speak, a far away fairy tale country. Till the 50s and the 60s, all the cliches you can imagine were representing the idea of India. But there was no real link apart from people like Max Müller or those who studied Sanskrit. But India was far away and it was a sort of fairy tale. Now, I think that this has changed, and it has changed because certain cultural strengths you have were present here, and it's not only Bollywood, it's not only yoga, it's the food, of course, also, which people experienced here, and then we travel. And then India has, of course, changed in itself. It's not anymore this sleepy giant somewhere very far away. And then there is one element, of course, which is so striking, and that is that distance doesn't play a role anymore. Because we have, we are proving that tonight.
Yes.
But the point is that distance, to overcome a distance in the Middle Ages was a huge energy factor. Salt was in the Middle Ages in Germany extremely expensive. Only the nobles could afford salt. Why? Because it had to be transported. And that made it expensive. Not that salt is expensive, but the transport. When I was still in India, on the post on India, and I was visiting in Germany, I think it was in Cologne, I met an Indian entrepreneur who lived here in Germany. And from what he lived? From stones. And he lived from the fact that he imported from India, I think near of Mumbai, stones for streets, to build streets. No value at all. And he transferred them from India to Germany, and he could compete against the price here. Why? Because to transport stones, which are very heavy, with a ship from Mumbai to Hamburg, doesn't cost anything. So the cost factor of overcoming the distance, in difference to the salt, doesn't play a role anymore, and it goes too far. That is another discussion for environmental reasons, but it means that these 5,000-6,000 kilometers which are between us do not play the same role anymore as they did in the past. What plays a role can even be culturally different. You can have different religions, but somehow what plays a role is whether countries somehow it works with them. If Indians and Germans meet professionally or privately, that was my experience, somehow over these cultural differences we have, of course, there is this magic touch there which allows them to cooperate also professionally, sometimes extremely successfully.
Great. I mean, as you mentioned about salt, I am also sometimes very proud to see that Himalayan salt also has some special place in most of the dining tables even today. Yeah, so which is also wonderful.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
can I say something to before we come to India, if you allow me, say something to, because you have alluded to that, to the role of diplomacy. Because I already said it has changed. And me in my life, what I did mostly when I dealt with Afghanistan, with the Taliban, when I dealt with Kosovo, with always these war situations, or in Bosnia, the same. What I experienced was that if a diplomat wants to be successful, and that is true in negotiations, but that is also true in contact with private persons in a country as an ambassador. The most important element he can have, and the most striking weapon he has, is trust. If people trust him. So it's absolutely the contrary of what you might think, that the diplomats are the guys, you know, who trick another country by not saying always the truth into a situation where my country has an advantage. It's not. Long term, this is not a successful receipt. What is successful is if people trust you, if you are seen as a reliable person who sees also the interest of others.
Perfect. Yeah.
And the second thing is, because you have referred to that too, a diplomat must also have courage. Because you can have the best ideas of how things should be done, how a treaty should look like, how peace should look like. If the moment is not ripe, then you can do nothing. Because you have very often forces which are much stronger than money, than military or whatever, who just need to be ripe for a solution, for example. But then, if you see now the situation is there, then you must have courage. And that's the second thing. You must have trust. You must don't try to lie. It doesn't work a long term. You must not say everything, but don't lie. Say the truth, because that creates trust. And the second thing is, if you feel the situation is right, whatever people say, you must jump on it and must seize the occasion. And that, if you do that, then you become a successful diplomat.
Thanks, Steiner. I think you provided a good view. So just, I mean, actually picking on the episode that you mentioned about getting the stone here, and also about these foundational aspects of diplomacy, yeah, the trust and the courage. I mean, the statistics says we have about today more than 1,900 German companies operating in India, and also about 200 Indian companies are present in Germany, also investing several millions of euros. How do you see Germans and India's play here? And why do you think Germany would need India? What are its needs from India?
Yeah, I think, you know, you mentioned that, and one has to be careful not to fall into the trap of prejudices. But of course, it is true, and it is still true, that Germany has certain organizational skills and this precision. That is true. And things are organized generally, not always, but generally in a pretty good way, and you experience that probably also. But what India has, in a much more difficult situation for many people in practice, is what you call yugad. That means, you know, this way of, even in surprisingly and in difficult and unexpected situations, to find a way and find a solution. And this you can bring to the Germans, also the Indian community here. You know, I don't know how much Indians you have in the moment under the pandemic conditions here, but it's about, let's say, 140, 150,000 Indians here in the Indian community. Your role is to be the spice in Germany, you know, to show them that, well, you have a nice organization, but I mean, things are changing, and there are also unexpected challenges, and there you need a little bit of jugaad. But of course, the precondition is language for that. And by the way, why do we speak English here? You know, for me, this is an advantage. For you, it's a disadvantage, because I have to make this effort to speak not in my natural language, in German, and I can enrich myself with that, which seems to be an effort. But you should not lose this advantage out of sight, because if you want to be an effective spice in Germany and add something, of course, language is key.
Noted, yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting that we are in this juncture, and I want to also bring about your personal experiences of speed of diplomacy or speed of decision making. I know now today, the governments are creating special corridors to facilitate some of the important decisions in a special corridor. How did you see or witness this as well? Because I see that you are bringing some aspects of it, which could also help the German as a population or a country here as well, which is good. But what was your observation as well?
I mean, India is surely still suffering structurally also of late consequences of colonialism. That is still there, and with this, you know, foreign rule, you have certain packages to carry, and one of the packages is, of course, there is a bureaucracy which takes a lot of time, and it's very difficult to, of course, for a foreigner who wants to invest in India to overcome hurdles which are very difficult to even see, because somehow they are hidden hurdles. And for that, of course, it's good to have certain corridors who speed up decisions. But we need that too. You can see that in Tesla, who's building this site to produce Tesla cars near Berlin. But they have achieved something which is unheard of in Germany, because they were interested in this investment, that within a year, this whole construction site seems to be ready or become ready in time. So it is possible, despite the fact that we have also certain bureaucratic hurdles.
Sure.
But the point is, you have something which we don't have, and that is youth, and this hunger I mentioned in the beginning. What we have, I think, is a very efficient education system, vocational training, but also these cost-free universities. And I think as we have a huge interest to have eager and hungry people from India being here, and as this distances don't play a role anymore, I think we have model conditions for cooperation with each other, no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, it's good that you highlight that synergy between the two nations. And I'm sure a lot of us who are listening in or later who are going to watch do see that there is a need for such hunger and need for such people to occupy certain spaces here to bring about maybe certain change or add certain dimension of energy.
Yes.
And certainly I can definitely relate to the nation of how it bounces back. You brought about the pandemic as well, how it has fared compared to other nations, despite all its other challenges structurally or inherent. I think it is also wonderful to see how the nation always bounces back and copes with this challenge.
Yes. Now, when I was ambassador in India, I had all these visitors, the CEOs of the big German companies, Siemens, Mercedes, all these huge companies, Lufthansa. And if you take cars, I asked these luxury car producing companies like Mercedes and BMW, I asked them, why on earth are you offering, seeing the Indian street conditions, cars which are in a way over-engineered, which are over-sophisticated, but in practice, seeing how the streets are, do not fit the needs and are too expensive. Why can you not produce something which is somehow in sync with the needs of the people? And the answer was that this would precondition a certain courage to change behaviors. And they said, we can sell our cars in the world, and as long as this works and as long as we are not forced to change our attitude, we go for what, our owners expect us to do. We will not take any risks and change the course and produce something which is more correspondent to the requirements of a market like India. So there is a certain inherent laziness which needs to be woken up. And I think that Indians with their hunger can help to wake that up. This is what Germany surely needs. Germany needs to be woken up. We have seen that in the pandemic. We see, for example, that everything which has to do with the internet, I mean, we are just training. We are just not at the heights. So there are many areas where Germany needs to be woken up. They can be good, but they need to be shaken a little bit to realize that the world is going on and that we cannot just sit on our successes of the past.
Okay. I mean, thanks again for some of the messages, and I think these needs to be definitely picked on by all of us. And what we also see, I think the reliability and the robustness, what, let's say, Germany brings, and the quick thinking and adaptability, what we would have from India, I think with various other initiatives, including Make in India and other wonderful initiatives that is ongoing today, this would be a good prospect. I would definitely see, I think, which the two countries will probably strengthen this going ahead. So thinking, staying on in that topic, how do you see then, I mean, not just looking into the short-term horizon that we would have today, but looking long-term, how do you see that the relationships would evolve? I mean, what are those big ticket agendas the two countries should have as per you, Mr. Steiner?
Now, if it is true what I said, that distance doesn't play the same role anymore as in the past. And it is true, of course, everybody can experience that. Then other factors become more important. And I think that this factor of what is your fundamental attitude to how a society should look like are decisive. And by that, I mean what I mentioned in the beginning, this, for example, the feeling we share in Germany and in India. We want to have a participatory democratic society where, yes, you can have rich people, but where the task of the society is to bring also the poor people out of this poorness so that they can participate. We have that too. This is why we have, this is a market economy, but we call it soziale Marktwirtschaft, social market economy, because it's exactly the same idea. Now, if you look around in the world, which has pretty much changed, where the feelings, I mean, the fundamentals which we thought will never change, have changed, and where you have autocratic challenges also everywhere around us. We see that, we are surprised, and suddenly see that old alliances are not so sure anymore. If we see that we will not have more countries in the moment who share our fundamental belief how a society should look like. We have rather the phenomenon that we have more autocratic societies gaining ground globally, who, for example, do not believe, as India does, as Germany does, as Europe does, in the idea of fundamental human rights. This is disputed in many societies outside our two countries. So in such a situation, we have every interest to intensify the cooperation, to strengthen each other mutually. That is the fundamental idea. The world 50 years ago, 70 years ago, when we take the period of our diplomatic relations, was completely different. 70 years ago, we had this divided world where, but with certain, inner securities. We don't have this anymore. I think we need to be aware that as we share the fundamentals, the fundamental values, and that is not a theoretical thing, this is a very practical thing. Because when you as an individual have the choice to be in a democracy or not in a democracy, I mean, we as Democrats prefer to live in a democracy and not somewhere else, and be protected also by the democratic fundamentals in a society. So we have this common interest of cooperation, apart from the fact that in many areas, and we mentioned already the education, but also that is also true in production, we can in an ideal way cooperate. I've seen that in these. I mean, there is a reason why the German trade chamber in India is the largest in the world. It has 6,000 members. And in no other country in the world would a trade chamber be so huge as in India. There's a reason for that. And the reason is that the cooperation works. The only thing is we have not exploited it to the full extent.
Okay. I would want to then now start to also connect then to the local Indian community, because I think all of us here are partially ambassadors of our own country, and we would also want to actually participate in such roles. You mentioned about some of these which are not exercised, some of the available channels. Do you think there are certain channels which we should be exercising if we want to, let's say, from individual level or from the community aspect, which are available, which are to be exercised?
I mean, the truth is that if you refer to any governmental channels, the truth is that in the end, it's individuals who can bring things forward or not. I mean, if you think about anything where you would need to rely on governmental support, normally you can wait for a long time to get their success. In the end, it's individual persons who make the change. It's individual initiatives. It's individual companies, who take a risk, who take a long-term perspective and say, this is a place, I have an idea, I have a product, I think this will sell well because it meets the needs of the respective other place. Yes, sometimes it can help these governmental challenges, but I think in the end, it's the persons. It's you and your German counterparts.
Okay. Yeah, and I think it's also valuable that you highlighted the core values that the two countries would cherish to also take it much farther into the long-term strategic relationship going ahead. Since you also spoke about the language, we spoke about English and Germany. Tell me something about the love of the Sanskrit language in Germany. I mean, it's also interesting to see the growing interest of this language, which has the rich tradition, which is still a language which is alive, despite of its thousands of years of history. What's your view on this, Steiner?
Now, the funny thing is that there is something which is very old and which links us, despite the distances over the continents. And that is, of course, the Indo German root languages, which are common. And I think in the end, this interest we had already in the 18th and 19th century, where Sanskrit, the searches for Sanskrit, I mean, this was Goethe, for example, was a fan, and it was a hype even in Germany, Sanskrit, and it has to do something with the fact that there are hidden links. I remember, I've forgotten that now after 5 years, but I remember that in Sanskrit, and there are many words like that, for example, the word Rad, the row of a bicycle or whatever, a chariot. In Sanskrit, it is Rada. In German, it's Rad. And you have a number of words and also certain grammatical similarities, which show that there is a link, a language, a deep-rooted language link between our countries, and of course also between European languages and Indian language roots. So that there is something.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, we didn't talk about that, but I come to your question. My wife.
Yes, I'm coming to that.
My wife, when she made this cookbook,
yes,
she found out that what we would have never thought, that the food which we think is our food, very Bavarian food, very specific, which only exists here, in reality comes from India. That there had been links in the past, despite the difficulty of traveling these huge distances. Links in many aspects, in language aspects, but it goes as far as in certain recipes for food.
Yes, so that was fantastic. Also, when I learned about this journey of you and your wife in India, and also some of these discoveries. So, which means there is an integral part of India, not just on the relationships that we have, but also integrally in the language itself, and also in the food.
Yes,
which is definitely another nice thing to know of.
When you come to food, as I told you when we first talked, my wife had the rule at the embassy that the Indian visitors only got German food, and the German visitors only got Indian food. And we had a cook from Rajasthan who was never in Germany, but who had to cook German food. And the recipes which were collected over the 3.5 years we lived there, in the end piled up, and this is how she made this cookbook. And what I detected was, and that is a little backlash to my theory, but it is true, that the Indians loved German food. And when we made visits of Indian company leaders to Germany for a week to travel around, it was always the same. Every year there was such a trip of 20 or 30 company leaders with their wives, and they traveled, and we saw different places in Germany. And it was always the same, because the first evening they said, oh, now I want to eat a German sausage and want to have German food. Mm-hmm. The second day, they loved it too. But the 5th or 6th day, they ate less from the German food. You know what they missed was the spice. It was always the same. After 5-6 days, they longed for their Indian spicy food. Always the same. And the same is true for Germans in India. What we miss in India, we love it. I love it too. But what we missed in India was bread. And you have this hunger of so there are certain things which, coming from the cooking of the mother, probably, which are part of your identity, despite the fact that you love the other kitchen. You need both.
Great, yes. So, moving beyond, the food and the language part, and now as the Indian community here, I think we now see that it's already probably several generations of the Indian community here who is living and making Germany as their home. How do you think we as Indians, as the community, as an integral part of this country and this home, which we would all call as, can engage into the community activities? What are some of the channels you think we can get ourselves integrated in, or become more participative or active?
Yeah, it's in the cultural field. It is also politically, it's in the local field, of course, and that is the main issue. But all this requires, unfortunately, certain, at least rudimentary language tools. That helps a lot, especially, you know, on the local level. You know that the Germans do talk English, or they try at least to talk English, but it's of course another thing if you feel there is an effort also from the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not only, that's not a gift towards the Germans, it's also, you know, for yourself, because it changes yourself. I mean, as my stint in India did change me, simply by this different experience and then having a different perspective towards your own country.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you will experience the same thing. There comes my wife. Komm doch mal. Okay. She goes out with the dog. So sorry. Now, this, I think, what is the richest experience you have is that when you go back to India, you can see your own country in a different perspective,
mm-hmm.
in a broader perspective. I surely do this with Germany and with Europe,
mm-hmm.
having been in India. And I'm sure this happens also to you, that when you go back to India, you can compare and you broaden your own perspective.
Mm-hmm.
One pays a price, that is true, that if you always stay local and don't see anything outside of yourself, then you don't have any problems and you follow the rules and you follow the day-to-day business. That's true, and that is maybe more difficult once you have been somewhere else in the world, but it enriches you and you understand your own country in a better way when you have seen it from the outside with a different perspective.
Yes.
I mean, back to your question, you have to see that Germany is a country who has made also a huge development.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a young person, a student, in a small town in Germany, to see a Black person, for example, would be for them, you know, like a shock, because they have never seen that.
Mm-hmm.
Germany was, I mean, didn't have colonies, thanks God, because we lost the First World War. So we didn't have this experience. And this was a society which was pretty homogeneous. I must tell you, I myself, being a kid, when I was 12 years old, I sometimes asked myself, am I a German? Because I'm not blonde. You know, it went so far. And now, if you look at the situation today,
mm-hmm.
I'm in Munich. Munich is a pretty rich city.
Mm-hmm.
1/3 of the persons living here are foreigners. 1/3. 2/3 of everything this city earns is earned in foreign countries.
Mm-hmm.
Munich, only 1/3 is local. All the rest has to do with the exchange to the world.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think that Germany, when we started our diplomatic relations 70 years ago, was a very closed shop with not many outside experiences. France had much more experiences outside. Britain had it, even Italy. But Germany was pretty much in itself. And when they had outside experiences, they just came out of the Second World War and have destroyed all the environment around themselves. But no real, internal experiences. So for a country going so far from this, the blonde, typical German society, closed, all the people were the same, to a society where 1/3 are foreigners in Munich. 2/3 are earned in the exchange with foreign countries. That is a huge change, of course. And mentally, this takes, of course, time for some, and some haven't grasped that. That is true. But I think it is important also that you understand where this society comes from, with the turmoils after the Nazis, etc., plus this opening which they had to undergo, and which they, of course, have accepted now, but it is a huge change. So it would be good to have also from you certain understanding that sometimes things take a certain time, and therefore probably sometimes you need to make an effort, and it's not easy to enter a closed shop. Yeah. I was posted in Switzerland. Believe me, it's very difficult in Zurich or in a city in Switzerland, in Bern, to enter the society when you're not from Bern, and if you don't talk, have the Swiss accent. Yeah. So you probably need to take also even do this extra effort also from your side.
Got it. Yeah, I think it's helpful here because if you give us this kind of a perspective, you're also divulging the statistics also helps us and where Germany is coming from. And also about some of the tips that you provided with respect to the language. I think this could be some of the takeaways also. And immediately I want to link to the part that we spoke about, about the Indian community's hunger. And many of us here probably came when our certain employers sent us here, for certain collaborations or the joint ventures, but it has definitely extended beyond. I myself have witnessed where we have entrepreneurs in different fields, in textiles, in food, in restaurant business, beyond. How do you think the Indian community here can explore their entrepreneurial hunger, and which of the fields? Is it in technology? Is it in pharma? Is it in clothes or textiles industry? Where you think there is good avenues for us to get into this entrepreneurial journey for the Indian community? Are there some areas which you want to provide some overview?
Surely India has an advantage in everything which is linked to business based on internet. Surely, as there you have an advantage, but I wouldn't limit it to that. I think in all the areas you have mentioned, if you have a good idea, if you have a good business idea, and if you take advantage of the advantage you really have, that you see what works in this society and where this society maybe needs also a little bit of push. And this is not only yoga, this is also certain ideas where maybe sometimes in a simpler way, you can be more efficient than with this over-engineered, over-sophisticated approach Germans sometimes have. And we see that truly in the treatment of the pandemic.
Okay. I mean, apart from the technology, any two immediate topics that comes about as one of the problem areas where a lot of external solution is required by the country?
Now, maybe the Germans wouldn't like to hear that, but I could imagine that if the Corona app, if one would have given this task to Indians, they might have come up in less time with a better result than the Germans so far have achieved it with all this idea, of protection of personality, this discussion we have here. So there are, of course, areas, but I wouldn't limit it to, because that can be also enclosing. I mean, that it can be even in stones. I told you, this guy is very successful, in bringing stones, street stones, cheap street stone. And so it can be in all the fields, and I wouldn't limit it to any specific area.
Thanks. I think this comes as a very good compliment from you, Mr. Steiner. So thanks also for your comment. I want to probably get into a little bit into an important area. Probably not everyone would be of thinking, but maybe it comes as an interesting topic when we are talking about second or third generation Indians who are already making Germany as their home. Yeah. How do you think the political aspects of, let's say, making our children or the next generation entering into that domain, do you think that as a reality, as a possibility? If so, how would one actually build their, kids into that particular domain? How is it done here? Maybe we want to know that from you.
In what domain? What?
In the political area or into the administrative aspects, because we do have several of administrative positions here, right? And if somebody wants to explore their career in the administrative options, would that be a possibility, or do you see that as a reality?
Of course. I mean, definitely, I would explore that. Of course, there again, you have the to solve the language issue, that is clear. But if you are in the second and third generation, obviously, and look at the composition of the German Bundestag. We have a problem. We don't have enough women represented there. But if you look at foreigners, there's a huge change, and you see that, of course, also in administrative context. You see that in the local administration and everywhere. Of course, this is there. By the way, when it comes to cooperation, I remember, but this now jumps to another issue. I don't want to.
Okay. But maybe moving on into the other important sphere for India as a country. We are an agrarian economy, yeah. So majority of us still rely on agriculture, and this is a field. Perhaps, Germany definitely has made several technological advancements, yeah. So how do you see, that, I also want to bring in the role of, let's say, the Indian community here. Do you see that there is a connection that we could make and also maybe have some entrepreneurial ventures? Do you see that as a space for us, or what have you personally experienced during your stay?
I think there is especially a space in healthy food, in everything which is naturally grown. I think if I were Indian, I would jump on this general feeling we have here that there is too much chemistry in each and everything around us here. So everything which would be seen in the context of healthy, not artificial, biologically sane products is a huge perspective here. And I think that India can contribute to that. So there are, of course, areas which do not jump to your mind immediately, but that would be something for you, as I think that on the other end, in India, we could be very helpful when it comes to water pollution. I've seen that, and I've discussed that also with your prime minister, who wanted to, have the Ganga, Mother Ganga clean in just a couple of years, which is absolutely impossible because it takes a long time. But I remember that I mentioned, you have Mother Ganga. We have Father Rhine. And the river of Rhine, which, stems from Switzerland and goes to the North Sea, was a very clean river till early last century. And then it became so polluted that it was forbidden, not to mention to fish, to swim in this river. And when I was born, when we started our diplomatic relations, the river Rhine was a dead river. No fish, nothing anymore, just chemistry. And then there had been a huge initiative undertaken with all the countries who border the Rhine, undertaken with all the different Bundesländer to clean the Rhine. And today, you can fish in the Rhine. The fish is a clean fish in the Rhine, but this has taken 30 years to get the Rhine clean again. But there are a number of experts, and I had very often in my embassy invited experts from Germany to come to India to show to show their experiences they had in the Rhine. So you have their areas of cooperation without any doubt. So I would go for, if you choose areas for cooperation where you can be of added value, I would choose all those areas which have to do with a clean environment, with a healthy upcoming of people, with the food we eat, because there is a general feeling here that we have done it with artificial pushing of food to be more efficient, and it has gone too far, and people don't like it anymore, and rightly say we want to have natural food. We are ready to pay more if the food is healthy, and that would be an area where, I mean, that is secured that you have a growth in all these fields.
Wonderful. I mean, it's always for me a happy feeling when I see Indian produce in the supermarket here in the German streets. And if you say that is one of the space which we could look out for, I think also a key message for all of us here to take back and maybe to explore further. So thanks for that view. Perhaps I want to reach to our end of this wonderful conversations. I think we have sailed through very nicely from your own personal side and into the relationship, looking into the history and also on to the different aspects. Since you personally had your own Bollywood experience, and now that you are also entering into your retirement, on the cultural side, how do you see this is getting stronger? I see that there is a need of contemporary arts or witnessing this on both sides. And also personal question to you, anything of your former experiences that you want to carry? You have the network of Bollywood. Anything that you want to explore during your retirement age?
You know, the point was that when I was active as a diplomat, my wife had to stand somehow in the second row. You know, she had to adopt to my calendar, etc. Now it's the inverse. It's completely different because she's the active one. I'm the lazy one. I must say, she is a psychotherapist, and I have to follow her calendar. as we did today. And she was out and didn't have time to participate, and I'm very happy with that. So I'm now here in the second row, surely not in the first row, and enjoy it. But what we wanted to do and what we couldn't do because of the pandemic situation was to again go back to India. I mean, we are missing that. We are eating Indian food, of course. And you can get pretty good food here in Munich and in all of Germany meanwhile, but it's not the same. You need to eat it on the ground. And when I say Indian food, it's the south, which is so different from the north. Everywhere you can get it. And I miss a bit of spice too. Sorry.
Okay, Mr. Steiner, it was my personal pleasure. And I'm sure all of this who had dialed in also thoroughly enjoyed. I personally did, encountering all of your anecdotes, experiences, and also your views, which is very important for the Indian community and the diaspora here. So thank you very much once again, Mr. Steiner.
It's a great pleasure, I must say.
Yeah, so with that, I open up this podium for some questions from the participating audience. Start to pick up. So I'll pick up, Mr. Steiner, the questions that have been asked over Zoom while we were conversing. So here I see one question, perhaps we touched upon this, maybe if you want to add further comments. So the question is, which channels are available for Indians in Germany to participate and contribute in official government bodies? Some concrete examples like Kommunale, Ausländerinnen und Ausländerverwaltung in Frankfurt.
No, you have, of course, in all the cities, in major cities, you have counterparts to whom you can address yourself. But and when it comes to schooling or whatever you have, in Munich you have ein Referat, which is specifically, I mean, one third of the population here, and that's to the benefit of Munich. Now, these are not people who live here who should be grateful that they are allowed to live here. No, it's in our interest, of course, and therefore you have in cities also these counterparts, and you have a right. It's not that you are there and asking support or questions because you are in a situation of a demandeur. No, you have a right to be to get your questions answered and to get helped in all the difficulties you might encounter in life. And of course, I mean, you had this, I have seen that too, this discussion on schooling, on the schooling system. I'm not a specialist in that, but I can imagine that sometimes it's not easy to bring the two worlds together.
Mm-hmm. Yep. With that, we will come to the end of this conversational part with Mr. Steiner. So thank you once again, and I wish you all the best and in all the endeavors, and also very good time ahead in your retirement years. You definitely have varied of experiences that you have built over the time in your career. So thank you once again on behalf of Samvad Germany for participating in this conversation. So I now hand it over back to Sri Hariji.
Yes, and let me thank you for that conversation. And really, I must say, I'm proud that so many Indians live here in Germany and somehow arrange. Sometimes it's not easy, and we know that the food is not spicy, but I'm very happy that you are here and that we have this occasion to talk to each other. Thank you very much.
My pleasure and our pleasure, Mr. Steiner. Thank you.
Mr. Steiner, thank you very much on behalf of Samvad Germany team. It was our pleasure to have you here, and you touched upon various points of your personal side and curious interest on the cultural aspects from India, and also the Indian-German relationship, how it was evolving over the years, and some of the areas where we could collaborate together. And it was really pleasure to hear how can we work together, and also as Indians, how can we collaborate and involve more in the community. So that was a real insightful message for all of us. And but last but not the least, and your love for Indian food, and that's really encouraging, and hopefully we all could meet or sometime when the corona goes over, and if we arrange a Indian food festival, that will be a good time to relish the Indian food to all the communities here. So with that, I think again, thanks from Samvad's team for taking time and joining in this platform and sharing your insights about Indian-German relationship, and also how we as Indian diaspora can contribute to build it to the next level. So thank you very much, Mr. Steiner.
Thank you. And don't forget the paneer, because I love paneer.
Okay.
Mr. Steiner, Rakesh here.
Yes.
We would, my wife and me, we would love to again invite you for homemade Indian food, and also paneer. As you came last time, we enjoyed.
Yes.
We would like to invite you again after this pandemic is over.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
I accept.
Thank
you.
And I would like to thank all the participants who joined today and patiently listen to this Samvad. And I hope you have liked this session. And also thanks for asking questions. So we were live on YouTube, and please watch out or subscribe to our YouTube channel. We will also share this link in the Facebook link. Please like our page and connect with us, and we are happy to hear your feedback, and let us know in case of any questions you have on this topic. Thank you very much, everyone.